I'm here with D.A. Horton, and we're going to talk about apologetics, in particular urban apologetics. Yeah. But when I say the word urban, people are probably hearing that and thinking, what are you even talking about, urban apologetics? I mean, we don't think about, like, country apologetics. I'm from South Georgia. We don't think about redneck apologetics. Maybe we should. But
Good, yeah.
what do we mean by urban?
Urban is a loaded term. It's a term that has been in transition for quite some time. Most often it was nuanced to be African American, Latino, impoverished, socioeconomic, and the lower classes. I think that's archaic. I think the reality of urban is now metropolitan. It's the reality of 82% of our nation lives in urbanized environments. The U.S. Census Bureau has determined that any municipality with 50,000 or more, that is urbanized. And so there's government funding programs, Section 8 housing. So you have literally sociological terms such as gentrification and ghettofication. Gentrification is the revitalization parts of the inner city. Ghettofication is the urbanization of poverty in the suburban context. And so now churches, people, live, work, play environments, they're not just confined to a suburban haven of yesteryear. They're popping up where the projects used to be. Case in point, Chicago, Cabrini Green. You would not want to be there unless you're part of the gangster disciples or the vice lords. Now, you can walk your dog at 4 o'clock in the morning and go get a slice of pizza because the neighborhood has changed so much. So urban, oversimplified, my homie Dahadi Lewis has a great definition: density and diversity. Where they intersect, that's urban.
Okay. And so why should we, as somebody might be listening to this, watching this, saying, okay, you're talking about urban, and yet I don't care about urban. I don't live there. Why? This only applies to somebody who lives in an urban area. And I would guess you might say, no, it doesn't. We need to all be thinking about this. Or what would you say?
Yeah, I mean, the majority of our nation, overwhelmingly, 82%, lives in an urbanized context. And so where you have that density and diversity, as a believer, we have the same job description, the Great Commission. So we should never be divorced from the reality of seeking to make disciples of all ethnicities, is what the Great Commission mandates. So even the socioeconomic complexities, the ethnic complexities, the generational aspects, the transition, the transient component of housing, all those things lend itself to how can me as a believer live on mission to make disciples when the community around me is in transition. So the complexity of urban now has been thrusted on people who have been able to evade it for so long, but now because the nations have been brought to our neighborhood, I believe that's by God's design, that he's nudging us by saying, remember that Great Commission, all ethnicities, I'm bringing the nations to you.
Yeah, so how would somebody, how should we think about urban ministry different than suburban ministry?
Yeah.
And how do those things differ?
So they're starting to bleed together.
Yeah.
You see the reality of suburban used to be really good at cloaking issues. They could masquerade it behind the white picket fences and the 5-bedroom houses. You have to look at even some of the components now, whereas in the city where I'm from, we did life outside of our house. So everything you did, your business was out in the streets. You just lived life out in the streets. But now in a suburban context, it's the opposite, where when you're trying to have community, the only time you can see your neighbor is when their garage goes up and they pull out wave, and then at 5 o'clock that night when it goes up and they drive in. So there's this communal component that God has made us to be relational beings. So that's where believers living in that suburban complex or that reality of the inner city complex, where they can now say, how can I intersect purposefully with my neighbors? So I'm living on mission. How can I cultivate community even if they're evading community? And it could be everything from making your lawn look well to abiding by the HOA association bylaws, how you are showing yourself what excellent stewardship looks like, but your motivation for the excellency of stewardship is a heart to engage in conversation, to say, I do this for the glory of my God, not just to appease the president of the homeowners association. So you have those complexities that could lead to, again, professionals of different ethnicities moving into the neighborhoods from Southeast Asia. We live in a neighborhood in Cumming, Georgia, of all places. You would not think that's urban, but you have Southeastern Asians, you have Japanese, you have Hispanic, African American, all living in this framework where I've been told some decades ago this was the capital of the KKK. It does not reflect that reality anymore. It's changed so much drastically. So now it's that component of, man, this has been thrusted upon me as a believer. How can I survey my surrounding and engage to make disciples?
Okay, so one of the things we're going to get into, we just talked about urban, what is urban, we talked about ministry. One of the things we're going to get into in a second is how does apologetics change in an urban environment? And since I'm here, maybe I'll talk about how it changes in a redneck environment. I don't know, but join us for the next segment.